We got some major stadium news and some major hirings in the Frontier League. You don't want to miss this episode of the Indy Ball Report podcast. We are back again, episode number 195 of the Indy Ball Report podcast. I'm Nick, he's Will. We're closing in on that, I guess, quarter of a millennium mark would be a way to describe it. But certainly dueling centuries is another way of looking at it.
Wait. Quarter of a millennium?
In a way, I meant the fifth, but technically a quarter is also kind of there. It's only 55 off from that, which I grant you is like a year away. So not necessarily closing in, but I mean, when you think about it, we're closer to that quarter of a millennium mark than we are to a tenth.
No, I'm with you, but I mean, I was just thinking like, oh, you're probably talking about closing in on 200, but then like, it's not a quarter.
I mean, I certainly was, but I'm not really known for my,
What if the Indy Ball Report gets to 1,000?
If we get to 1,000, I'll be very impressed, because what would that be like? That'd be a long year stretch.
That'd be a long time.
It would. I mean, what would it be? Probably close to 18 years, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, if I'm doing the math just right quickly in my head, then it'd be like nearly 2 decades of this.
Wowza.
I mean, quite frankly, that would last longer than a lot of independent league teams.
Way longer.
Which, it would kind of low-key be funny in a way, but at the same time it would be kind of sad. Which, my mistake, it's closer to 19 years. It's slightly over that. It's about 19 years and 3 months.
Okay. Yeah, so, well, we're not close to 1,000, but we are close to 200.
We are. And that's something that's worth noting. Because really, the goal is like 365. So that way, in theory, you could listen to a different episode every day of the year without having a repeat.
That you think people do that?
I hope they don't, for their own sanity.
That'd be pretty amazing if they did, though. If someone out there did. I'd
respect the dedication, but then also recommend a psychiatric evaluation, is what I would say to that. With that said, you know who doesn't need an evaluation?
Who?
The people that manage the great province of Quebec, because they see the importance in preserving athletic institutions.
What makes you say that?
Well, I would say the about $11.3 million they plan on putting into the Greater Stade Canique complex over the next 5 years would be the real thing that would really make me say something like that, because they're going to be doing a massive renovation over there.
To see that kind of money go, I mean, to be honest with you, it's cool that you see like the city kind of investing in that, because I guess it's not. I mean, of course, like you have like stadiums that are publicly funded or even publicly owned. Rarely do you see that kind of money being put in like for planned renovations of the next 5 years. But I mean, that's really going to improve that stadium and keep that team around for the long haul. That's really cool and great for the people of Quebec and those fans as well.
It certainly is. I mean, especially because as we're going to go through this story here, you can see that they're really kind of trying to invest in not just your standard kind of like outward facing amenities, but everything kind of just generally as a whole. It seems more of a refresh than it is like an upgrade, if that makes sense. As I'm about to say here, the plan is to get this done over the next 5 years, so the renovation will be complete in 2027. So this is kind of a phase type deal where year 1, they're going to accomplish certain goals, year 2, other ones, and just kind of generally break it apart into more bite-sized chunks, so that way you don't have ongoing work whilst you have baseball being played and whilst you have other events there as well. The main thing or main upgrades are to building aesthetics, so like the outward canopies, new entrances and exits, general repairs, new bleachers, and new lighting. If you recall, there was a power outage during the championship series last year, although that was more due to a problem with the actual electric provider, Hydro-Quebec. But even still, they'll have new, what I believe to be stanchion lighting. Of course, I'm going off of article that was translated from French to English. So not everything's going to be a 1-for-1 switch over. If I understood French, I would have just read it as it was written, and that we would have no lost in translation effect here. But unfortunately, I am not bilingual. That said, though, 1.4 million is going to be spent this past year, and the option was either to renovate the Canuck Stadium or to just build a brand new one. However, when you do the numbers, it was either about 11 million in renovation or 30 to 50 million in, building and constructing a new ballpark. Of course, that is all in Canadian money as opposed to American money. So there is a bit of a drop off if you were to do it in American money. I imagine that number is probably about 20% less. It depends on what the exchange rate is right now, but I believe it's about 80% of an American dollar is a Canadian dollar. But that's kind of displaying here. The important thing here to really grasp is they're going to be doing a lot of work to the stadium to try and extend its lifespan.
Right, because, of course, in independent league baseball, you're always trying to, I guess, as far as the renovations, you're trying to do what you can. And, of course, because pretty rarely do you have a case where you're able to have a second stadium from the time that really goes underway. Honestly, Nick, do you know of a franchise that I guess built a stadium for their inception and then have since built another one? I don't think so.
I don't think having actually built it the first time. I know with St. Paul, they explicitly built something for themselves the second time around, which is kind of why they're a AAA team now. They have that. And obviously there are a lot of cases, as we're going to discuss in a little bit, where there is a ballpark built with the intention of putting a team there, whether affiliated or unaffiliated. But as far as okay, we're going to build one explicitly for a team and then we're going to build a new one. On the independent level, there's nothing that immediately comes to my mind. There may be a case of that, though, but I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Right. So, you're always looking for ways to improve the stadium without just to keep its lifespan going, keep the team alive. And it seems like that's what the city of Quebec is doing. And, of course, you mentioned the power outage in the playoffs. Yeah, big problem. That's going to need to be fixed, and kind of putting a new one in there as well. So it's really cool to see. I think that the city kind of putting that type of investment into an indie ball team like the Capitals, and it's good to see. And I think it's why that they are one of the best franchises in all of independent league baseball, and I think I feel very confident saying that.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with that. That you saw even during the power outage, I was going to mention, we did get that kind of awesome moment with the phones in the dark and everything. That was really cool. You see a lot of it there. And honestly, Quebec is one of the, I think most underrated markets for those looking from the outside in, just because of the amount of support that they get. The Canadian markets seem to be either feast or famine, where you have markets like Winnipeg and Quebec where they're just rabid. They're always there. They're really supporting their teams. And then you have other markets that aren't as, I guess, aren't as fervent, in their teams. But yeah, no, it's definitely good to see them getting that money put in there. And of course, I've had to go ahead and try and do the conversion rate here. At least from what it is right now, it's about 3/4 of an American dollar. So it's about 8.5 million that's getting put in here, American. So still a large sum of money, certainly. Yeah. But
yeah, absolutely. A lot of money being put in, and the stadium's going to really improve, and that's certainly great to see for Capitals fans for sure.
Definitely. And on that note, we're going to go a bit further south, all the way to Shreveport, Louisiana for this next bit, which is also a stadium that is, not quite on the renovation side of it, because if you remember a couple weeks back, we mentioned that Shreveport was talking about putting in a new ballpark, and there was all sorts of, kind of complexities around that. If you want to go back and listen to those, you can certainly go back and find that episode. I think it was like 190, 191, like back roughly right around there. So it was like about a month or so back. But anyway, there's new updates on that front. So we figure we update you on that. And before we continue on, as far as Shreveport goes, Fairgrounds Field, the existing field that's hosted both a Texas League team and an American Association team, that is set for demolition with a plan to replace it with a new ballpark, kind of going in there. The plans for it to be multi-use, so have soccer, baseball, and concerts and the like to really kind of take over for it. The city is partnered with REV Entertainment to build the stadium. As I previously mentioned, it's a multi-use plan. This firm is headed by Neil Liebman. Liebman is a managing partner of Top Tier Sports in addition to being the head of REV Entertainment. Why is that important that he's with Top Tier Sports? That's because Top Tier Sports owns a stake in an American Association team, namely the Cleburne Railroaders. So the reason why we could obviously say this is important is because if you're building a brand new ballpark, you want to have a kind of a permanent tenant there, a tentpole tenant. The American Association is always looking for good markets to go to. You already have someone that's familiar with their business that clearly has, some interest in remaining part of the American Association. That kind of gives them a foot in the door to go into a market they were previously in as well. You would assume with a brand new ballpark, with money being put into that area, that this would be kind of an ideal market to go into. It would also kind of help Cleburne out as well, give you more of a true team to go to. I believe when we went through all this, we did the math on how far it would be, and it definitely helps out with the South Division, or I guess they went East and West, but you could go back to North and South a little bit easier if you were to go to Shreveport. So that's kind of the unspecified leading contender if this gets built. The reason I say if it gets built is because you still need to finalize plans, and the city in the city of Shreveport is currently in the midst of a runoff election that is going to take place in the middle of December as to figure out who the next mayor is going to be. Both mayoral candidates have kind of been lukewarm on it, not saying they're for it, not saying they're against it, kind of just saying like, if we can make something work financially, it'd be great. It seems like a good idea, but we have to look at the greater plan. We're just in the planning stage. So it's a very lukewarm. We're interested, but we really don't want to pay for it. And we need to see what the whole deal here is situation. So, I guess the too long summary is they're tearing down the old stadium. They want to build a new stadium. It would be with REV, whose top managing partner is a managing partner in a firm that owns part of an American Association League team. So if they build a stadium, the American Association is likely a front runner to go in there.
Yeah, I think Shreveport, and of course this is still a long way away from actually materializing, but I think that Shreveport would definitely be an American Association fit, a pretty easy American Association fit too, and a good one in that. But it is interesting, I guess, that the kind of the reactions of both of the mayoral candidates. I don't know if maybe that's just like politician talk, and maybe they would be interested, maybe they wouldn't. But I mean, I feel like it's kind of like the easy response to say like, yeah, I mean, it sounds like if you're saying, would you like a stadium or would you not like a stadium? The answer is yes, I would like a stadium. But then when you get into how are you going to pay for it, I think that that's where you have some disagreements. And so I guess it's not it's interesting as far as like how much is REV Entertainment going to foot the bill compared to the city of Shreveport, and that's all stuff that needs to be worked out. But if it can be worked out, I think this is a really strong option for the American Association if it can get there. And it seems like they're interested in putting professional baseball there. It kind of seems like a home run American Association fit if they can make it happen. But I think that it's interesting that it's interesting for sure that whoever takes over as far as the new mayor, it's ultimately going to fall on their desk and as far as their agenda. And I think that's I think we'll get more clarity once that kind of happens, and I guess they get into more specifics of whoever wins in their job. But it's interesting because the lukewarm characterization that you made, Nick, I think is right. And it's important because, the old mayor, of course, was all in onto this, but at the end of the day, like they're going to have to make an agreement with the new one as well. So, I think it's still a developing story, still a lot more to get to eventually, but, the lukewarmness, I guess, of the mayors to it, and maybe it's just political talk. I don't really know politics very much, but, and I'm not going to pretend to know, but, it's interesting that neither of them have come out and said, like, wow, this is a great idea. I guess they haven't come out and said this is a horrible idea, but it's just a matter of who's going to pay for what, which is, politics in general.
Yeah, I think it's more or less a play on, you don't really want to commit to building a stadium that is going to, potentially run you, tens of millions of dollars, will likely run you tens of millions of dollars when we get down to it. I mean, we saw from the last story we covered in Quebec, building a brand new one would cost you 30 to 50 million in Canadian. Now, granted, you again knock off a quarter of that price point. Even still, you're looking at a large sum of money. You're still looking at, over $25 million to build this thing. So for a city like Shreveport, even, fronting half of it takes money out of the budget. You have to figure out ways to fund it. It's not like you're just throwing that money up front, but you have to pay people, up front. So you'd have to sell bonds. You have to do other things to raise that money, or you have to cut certain services and whatnot, and cutting services is never really a popular thing. It's all about figuring that part out. So I definitely get that on that front there. Plus, when you're running in an election, a stadium can certainly seem like a luxury item when there's other issues to address and other things to go after. When you say like, oh yeah, by the way, I want to spend the city's money on building a brand new baseball stadium from which we haven't had a baseball team here in, about a decade. And the last few times it hasn't exactly been horribly successful here either. And, I think it's just a good decision because economic reasons. It's not exactly the easiest to sell, so I don't really expect them to come out and say that. Plus, if you do come out and say, hey, I'm in favor of this, let's get this done, it also weakens your negotiating position, right? Like, if you're all gung-ho for it, then you're like, oh, well, if I'm REV, and it's like, well, you said you were going to build it, you seem like you really want it, now either you're going to have to walk that back, or you're going to have to kind of give more on your position. So I don't think anyone wants that from their perspective there. That being said, still, I think something probably gets built. There's enough going around on it. And more importantly than that, I just don't think you demolish something that is still maybe not the most usable thing, but salvageable, unless you have an intention of replacing it. So from that perspective, I do think something gets done there. But I do think we're kind of a ways away. I wouldn't really expect to see anything, really get moving till the end of 23, probably. Possibly 24. I think it is kind of a long-term goal on that front. Just because, when you go from planning stage to actual construction, it's going to take some time. That's just the reality of it. Look at Hagerstown. In 21, the plan was to build a new stadium, have a team in there for, 22 or 23? And now all of a sudden, it's like, okay, we'll have a stadium built and we'll have a team in there for 24. So it takes a while to get it done. And that's in a situation where you don't have as many complications. Granted, they had other legal complications acquiring the land, which kind of sort of exist here as far as the demolition part goes. But yeah, I think it's a long-term thing, but I do think it's something that does get done.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think long-term you would think some like that would get done. Hard to say definitively at the moment because it's still such a long time away. But you really hope it can get done because there's definitely a lot of potential with this market and it being like a good American Association fit. So I hope something gets done and that's the route they go because I think it could work well, but still quite a long way away from that.
Definitely. And I just want to end it with this thought. Wouldn't it be funny if the Atlantic League grabbed it?
I would just be confused, but yes, it would be funny.
We need someone to fill in for the Sugarland way the hell out of the map of the league category. It's not the same being able to travel by bus for all of this.
You take a bus for every single team except one.
We need to fly into Shreveport. There may be a hurricane. Don't ask questions.
Maybe.
Oh God.
There also might not be a hurricane.
Yeah, we don't know. But there's definitely a tropical depression coming around the Gulf, so we'll keep our eye on it. But yeah, I just kind of want to see the Atlantic League just say, screw it. We're going to take this market because we can. Although nowadays, I think the American Association can go, not really. It's our market. So get lost.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably more likely.
Yeah. But you know who isn't getting lost?
Who?
The Boomers staff. Because Jamie Bennett and Michael Larson just got 3-year extensions that are going to take them through 2025 because they're both good at their jobs.
Yeah, they're both very good at their jobs. And of course, I mean, Jamie Bennett has done an unbelievable job over the last few years specifically. And not to mention, I mean, of course, with the championship in 2021, of course. But I mean, just the playoff success that they have had in his tenure has been quite impressive. I think it speaks to a lot of him. I think as far as extending him and extending the GM Michael Larson as well, it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, Bennett specifically has done such a great job, and that postseason success really sticks out with him and the Boomers organization as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, 517 and 453 record will do that for you. Going to back-to-back championships will do that for you. And I believe I read on their site that they had, up until this past year when they lost to Quebec in the championship, won 11 straight playoff series, which is just kind of a crazy thing to think about, that they went that many years just like, yep, we're going to make the postseason. And then when we make the postseason, we're going to win a championship because that's what we do. So Jamie Bennett, the lone manager in the Boomers history, certainly worthy of that extension. Michael Larson, no different here. He topped on in 2018 and since then has won 2 Executive of the Year awards. A guy that's definitely been good for the organization, good for the ballpark too, just from a non-baseball perspective, but also obviously from a baseball perspective. He's managed to continue this success that the Boomers have had historically, and certainly the past 2 years have been very good for them as well. With the championship in 21, I had like air go up my nose as opposed to going down. That was weird. But obviously with the championship in 2021 and the near championship in 2022. So definitely good extensions on both their parts.
Yeah, totally. And a no-brainer, and excited to see what the two of them can continue to do with this organization and see if more playoff success is on the way.
Hopefully it is for them, but they may have some competition in Lake Erie, who rounded out their coaching staff. Jared Lemieux added a guy that he's, a bit familiar with from his time in New Jersey, and that Frontier League fans are certainly familiar with, because of course you'd be familiar with your all-time hit king in Santiago Chirino. He's going to get added to the staff. Hitting coach. He'll be a player coach for this upcoming year. As I just mentioned, he's the Frontier League's all-time hits leader, but also their all-time at-bat, game played, and runs scored leader there. The hit number is just a shade over 900. So if he manages to put up about, I think it was 93, 97 hits, something like that, this upcoming year, he will be the first player in Frontier League history to hit for 1,000 hits, which is really a remarkable accomplishment when you think about between the games played and just to have that kind of longevity to last that long, to get that many hits and to have that kind of consistent production. It's really quite impressive.
Yeah, so impressive. He continues to amaze and is truly such a consistent hitter in the Frontier League. I mean, with his time with Normal as well as the Jackals too. And I think that it's cool to see him start to I don't know if he views this as like a way to start to kind of dabble into the coaching end of things as well. But he certainly, I mean, this is when you talk about a player coach and an ideal candidate for a player coach. I mean, Santiago Torino totally fits that billing because of his experience in indie ball, and also he's really good.
Yeah.
And he's still really good, and not to mention he's also a really good addition at the top of the lineup for Lake Erie as well. And, I mean, Lake Erie has struggled quite a bit. So they need a bat like this on the surface as far as the player end of things. But I think it's interesting to see him kind of start to nibble in the coaching end of things. But hey, I mean, I believe he's 31 at the moment, so 31 years old. So, he's been around, and cool to see him start to get into coaching a little bit. And I think that for Lake Erie, it's really it's a nice move, one, to get that bat into the lineup, and to get others to learn from him.
Certainly. I mean, at 31 though, he's still in his prime. He's still got like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
He's definitely got that. And frankly, I could see him getting, I think 1,000 hits is certainly something that's achievable, but I kind of wonder where his number is going to be at. Like, is it going to be 12,000? Is it going to, or not 12,000? Is it going to be 1,200 is what I mean. If he gets 12,000, I'll be really impressed. But will he get to 1,200? Will he get to, will it be more like 1,100? What's that number for him? So I'll be interested to see that. But you are right, Will. I mean, at this point, going to a player coach thing, is it just like, hey, if we call you a player coach, we can pay you a little bit more money? Or is it why don't you do this? You know what you're doing. You've been around for a while. You're an experienced ball player. We think you have something to do in that regard. I don't quite know what it is. It makes sense though that Jared Lemieux would add a guy that he's familiar with, that he's worked with for a couple of years now, and that, presumably he knows fairly well. So it makes sense on that front. Lake Erie is also a team that, they had a lot of up and down, in recent years. So to be able to, kind of do something a little bit different with the coaching staff, but while still adding someone that's going to be a productive player, keeping a younger coaching staff as well. I think that's something that's very interesting, and I'm going to be very curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, really curious to see how that plays out, and kind of what this means for him in the future as well. But I think that I think it's a good move, and again, big. It's a big addition into Lake Erie's lineup.
Yeah, certainly, Darren. As we shift from kind of inexperienced coaching, we go to someone that's certainly experienced with the Empire State Gray's new manager. Now, what I will say before I announce who it is, I got word of someone that could potentially be hired, who now we're going to wind up saying their name because they did get hired a couple months back, where someone sent me a thing going, hey, Empire State just posted this promotional image, but then they quickly deleted it. Do you think this person could be the manager of the team? And I was like, I mean, maybe he's done work with them in the past, but I don't really think that's the case. Why would someone that with this kind of resume want to work for Empire State? But now that Mark Mason is the new manager of the Empire State Grays, replacing Gil Rondon, I certainly don't look great. There's some egg on my face for that, because the Empire State mistakenly posted that about a month ago. And like I said, I just didn't think you'd want to go to a team that was 6-90. And I genuinely thought that once he was done with, York, either he'd be taking a little bit of time off before he went back for a new job, or he'd be looking for, an established team that he knows will exist for a while. And, he'd still work with the Empire League, because he did that back in, I think it was 2020. He started working with them, and he managed one of their teams that year, being that the Atlantic League wasn't doing anything. But I just didn't think there would be a possibility of him wanting to go to a team that I think we could rightfully describe last year as a shit show, and one that, quite frankly, probably should not have been brought back.
I will say, did I think Mark Mason was going to manage again? Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
For the Empire State Grays, no idea. I mean, this totally came out of left field, and not that it's not a good hire, I guess, because who would technically? I guess that would be the league that would make the hire, right? You would think,
I would imagine it's the Empire State League, or Empire League, I guess is just what it's called. I imagine they would be the ones to make the hire because they're the ones technically running the team and paying for the team, which I guess is why they were brought back. Because, it's not like a formal, like, Frontier League ran team, like how the Road Warriors are in the Atlantic League. That third party's paying. That's why we normally see, like, the Pecos League All-Stars under the Houston Apollos banner get ran out there because it saves expenses. So I guess nobody else wanted to step up, or they're like, hey, we like how you did last year. Why don't you come back, even though your record was abysmal?
Yeah, so I think that and of course Mason has had, ties to the Empire League for quite a while now. He brought in a lot of those Empire League guys to York too. Yeah. It's a well-established connection. But I have to say, I am very surprised that, and I think he's a good manager. This is obviously a very tall task for any manager. I don't care if you put name whoever you think the best manager in baseball is. If you put him in this spot, I don't know how many games they would win either. But I'm very surprised to see that Mason wanted to take this job, especially, at this point in his career. Thought he'd be a little bit choosy, maybe with I'm waiting for the right opportunity. I'm not just going to take any opening that comes up. And then, to see him take the, you're on the road the entire season. It is a tough job. And good for those players and good for Empire State that they were able to do it. But I'm really surprised that Mason took this job. Very surprised.
Yeah, the only thing that can kind of come to my mind is that maybe he wants another Atlantic League gig, and with Hagerstown coming in next year, it's like, oh, well, I could do this Empire State thing for, a year, and then I could jump to Hagerstown. But at the same point in time, Frederick's an option if you wanted to do that and have a challenge. But I guess it makes sense in the line of thinking of if he doesn't really, I don't want to say he doesn't want to manage anymore, because obviously, there's still that opportunity there. But if you want to start to transition away from managing, which, especially on the independent league level, is kind of a grueling task, because not just in the summer where you're doing, the actual managing part of it. In the off season too, you're scouting guys, you're going through, you're building your roster, you're doing a lot of other work here. It's not necessarily on the affiliated level where it's okay, you still got some off season work to do, there's still player development tasks to do. But once you get to the regular season, you're not really handling the roster. Someone else is doing that for you. And in a lot of cases, they're okay, here's what your lineup's going to be for the day, and here's what your objectives are, right? On the independent level, it's okay, you're in charge of the roster because the GMs, they're going to handle it, but they also have to make sure that the team turns profit. They got to make sure there's other events scheduled there. There's a lot more that GM's going to have to do than just the roster. So it's being a manager is more you're also kind of in charge of baseball ops for a lot of teams. So when you're going ahead and doing all that stuff, it kind of wears you down after a while, and understandably so. So maybe it's okay, I don't really want to have to deal with this grind too much longer, but I want to stay active in the game. I want to kind of dial it down a little bit, and transitioning to being okay, I'll handle the Empire State Grays. I'll be a bit of a gauntlet for a year, but then once they're gone, then I'll be able to go and maybe manage an Empire League team where it's, a 90-day to 120-day schedule. It's a lot easier to do, and I'll be able to do instructional work for a large chunk of the year, and it'll be a bit of a slower and easier pace. That makes sense to me then. It's kind of that soft transition. But, if we're looking at this from just a traditional sense of oh, the guy that's fourth all time in Atlantic League wins with over 606 wins, it wants to go ahead and, try to get another big type of coaching role, kind of have the same role he had in York. I don't know if this is the geek for that.
Yeah, it's confusing. I definitely see what you're saying, Nick. I think that possibly he didn't really want to have a whole lot to do with trying to kind of like take a step back where you just have to worry about managing. I mean, granted, there's still a lot of other not great parts of the job. I mean, again, don't have home games and the travel is rough, and it's something that's really surprising. And like, I don't like you say, if he's looking to get another Atlantic League job, I don't know why this would be the gig unless he's just saying like, hey, unless he's doing like a favor for the guys in the Empire League, which is also a possibility too. I don't know. It's just kind of, it's a weird timing on it. And, I mean, again, great for the Grays. And I mean, again, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. I mean, in the wins and losses, but I guess maybe in like the vibes and the morale.
Yeah.
I guess that, you have a guy like Mason there, but it's still going to be a tough situation, and maybe there could be slightly improved from last year. But I think that it was definitely a turn I did not see coming in the least. I really didn't.
Yeah, like I want to see what the rest of the staff's going to look like, because I know Jonathan Abdeldejo was on the staff last year, I think as a bench coach. So I'm going to be very curious to see if he's like, yeah, Johnny A, come back. Because don't they have a relationship from time in York, or am I misremembering it?
Well, Abdeldejo I know was in Lancaster, but okay. I think he was there for a while, and he was the pitching coach under Ross Peoples. Okay,
so then it was Lancaster. I got them confused. I knew he was in Pennsylvania. I wasn't sure if it was York.
Yeah, no, he's with the Barnstormers.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, like, there's still probably a connection there. I mean, you play the guy enough, you're probably talking to him enough.
I'm sure.
So, I mean, like, maybe it's on that level. Like, I'm going to be very interested to see that. And I'm not going to lie, part of, like, the I just kind of want to see what happens part of me really kind of wants to see Telvin Nash playing for the Empire State Grays.
Oh my god.
Because, like, obviously the Grays are still not going to be good. It doesn't really matter who you put on that team. I mean, they're just not going to be good. That's just, they're a traveling team. There's no disrespect. It's just the way it is. But if you had, like, Telvin Nash there against Frontier League pitching, man, I think Telvin Nash could probably turn into like a 10-WAR player. I think he just kind of single-handedly wins them like 2 or 3 or 4 games. You know, like, I'm very curious to see what he could do in a full 96-game season in the Frontier League, even if it is for the Grays.
It would, to be honest with you, Nick, I think they would just walk him every time.
I don't know if they give him the Courtney Hawkins treatment. I think at a certain point you have to pitch to him like that, or I mean,
with the rest of the lineup, you know, like, why would you?
That's a fair point. I mean, like, it is honestly a fair point. Cause
I mean in a hypothetical scenario, I mean, yeah, like him against Frontier League pitching would be kind of hilarious, but like at the same time, I feel like they just wouldn't pitch to him, because why would you?
I mean, like, that's true, but at the same point in time, though, is a dude gonna get walked like 200 times? Like, at a certain point, you gotta pitch to him.
Right. I'm sure that they'd pitch to him at some... I don't know. It's an interesting question. Of course, it'll never happen, but it's fun to think about, I guess.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, there's gonna be situations, too, where there's... Like, if there's a guy on base, oh, yeah, no, I'm not pitching to him. Just, like, yeah, intentionally walk him. That's fine by me. But, like... I don't know, man. I kind of want to see this morbid curiosity, or I really do. And equally as funny to me would be a guy getting like 230 plate appearances and drawing like 210 walks. Like, that'd be equally as funny to me. Just imagine his on base percentage if that was the case.
Yeah, it would be insane. Like, I mean, he's probably up near 500, I think, honestly.
Yeah, he bats like 10 for 20, draws 210 walks. That OPS would just be off the chain.
Just, yeah, insane. That fun thing to think about. Of course, it'll never happen, but...
How'd you get an 1800 OPS?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It would be pretty insane.
Yeah, but... Yeah, I'm curious to see how this works out, though. Like, on a serious note, I am curious to see, like, how he's going to be able to do this. Because, like, obviously, when you saw the quality of player that the Empire State Grays had last year, and I'd say no disrespect, but I mean, it's kind of hard not to at this stage. There's like 3 or 4 guys on the team that was like, oh, okay, yeah, these are, solid guys, legitimate guys. And then the rest of them was like, we could see why you're in the Empire League. You're not quite up to this level. You may be one day, but right now you're not. So I'm going to be curious to see like if he's able to pull in other guys that maybe aren't Empire guys, or if it's just going to be like, here's the Empire guys, pick the ones you want. And kind of try to make it work from there. Like, obviously, Gil Rondon did not do well, 6-90, although he almost had a winning streak. Remember that stretch where they won 2 games in a row? We're like, are they about to win 3 in a row?
Yes, I do remember, yeah.
We were like, here, the turnaround starts today. And then it was like, oh, no, wait, New York's about to just choke slam them after somehow New York managed to lose a Danny Wierchanski start to like the Empire State Grays. We're not quite sure how that happened, but it won't happen again. And any case, yeah, like obviously Rondon didn't do a great job, but he didn't have a lot to work with. I have to imagine Mason does a little bit better, but
yeah, I think he has. I mean, you can't be worse. You can't.
I mean, technically, you could be 5-91.
You can't be worse.
I see, but we're talking about a traveling team here, so you can be worse.
I get it. I mean, there's just no way you can win less than 6 games in a year. I thought you were crazy for saying that they might not win double-digit games at the beginning of the year, but you're right.
I know, like, I want to go back and listen to that Frontier League preview and just kind of go back and hear like, oh yeah, I think they'll win like 15 games or like whatever we said about them. Because I'm sure it was something similar to the Apollos where we're like, oh yeah, I mean like they're not going to be a contender. They'll be lucky to win 20 games. And I just don't know what we said about that team. And I'm really curious to know if we were like optimistic about it. We were like, oh, maybe they win 20, 25 games. Or if we were just like, yeah, no, this team is not going to do it. 12 wins.
Yeah, I don't remember specifically what was said, but I mean, I remember saying like, yeah, of course they'll get to double-digit wins. And you're like, I don't know about that. I'm like, Nick, they have to get to double-digit wins. They didn't. But
I'm actually very curious about. I'm going to go back and listen to just that section of that episode when we're done here because I'm very curious to know what I said about that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, man, he can't be worse. Mason can't have a worse team than that. You would, I think.
So at about 1 a.m. on December the 3rd, 2022, do we want to have any sort of prediction as to how bad they're going to be in 96 games?
It's hard to do that without really knowing much of the roster.
Does it really matter who's on that roster? Like I'm
going to say they win 14 games.
Okay, because I was going to say, like, I hate to just say it like that, but I mean, it's the Grace. Like, it's not going to matter who's on that roster. They're not winning a lot of games.
Yeah, I'm going to go 14.
Oh, wow. More than doubling their win total from last year, which is a very sad state of affairs. But I'm going to undercut you and go with 12 wins. I think they double it exactly. I think they managed to put together like a 3 or 4 game winning streak at some point. And I feel like we're going to see a lot of 20-game losing streaks here. But I think 12 is the number.
Not a good recipe.
Yeah, I'm thinking like 12 is where I want to sit right now. Because I feel like they win like 2 or 3 a month.
That's not good when you're saying that they'll put together a couple 20-plus loss losing streaks. That probably means your team won't be very good.
I mean, like, again, 6-90. 6-90, man.
Not good.
They nearly set the professional record for most consecutive losses. And then Tri-City stopped them. But we won't talk about that for the sake of Tri-City. But anywho, I think we've gone on long enough about the Grays and their futility. So with that said, we don't really have too much else left to add. In fact, we have nothing else left for this week. But there is a point that I wanted to make because I realized before we jumped on, normally we should have been promoting like the Q&A that we always do at the end of the year, and we haven't promoted that yet. So do we want to set a date for that, or because I'm looking at these? I'm looking at either the 23rd or the 30th.
Let me look. 23rd or what?
Or the 30th is where I'm at. Because then that gives us like
23rd. Because 30th, I have to engineer something. I have to engineer for Islanders that night.
Okay, so then we'll go with 23. All right, so let's see, how's that? 1, 2, 3 weeks away. So we got 3 weeks. Try to get questions in for a Q&A. We're going to do that on the 23rd when we're going to record it. So make a point to try and get them in before the 23rd. I don't know when we're going to record on the 23rd, but we're going to record on the 23rd, and it'll come out on Christmas Eve. So that's your Christmas gift from us, is a Q&A episode. As we say every year, the Q&A episode is as long as you make it. We're going to go until we're out of questions, whether that's 5 minutes or 25 minutes or 50 minutes, or as in the case in past years, 90 minutes to 2 hours. It's going to go on as long as you ask questions for. So, whenever you have a question, regardless of what it's about, if it's independently related, if it's related to the show, if it's related to one of us, if it's related to any of the independent teams, or just a general question that you're curious to hear our thoughts on, be sure to send it in. You could do that via the social media, which I guess I'll just plug that now. I mean, it makes the most sense to do it now, which would be Twitter at IndieBallPod, would be Instagram at IndieBallReport, AOPB_news. Submit questions to any of those places. We'll have those. You could do so via email as well, IndieBallReport@gmail.com if you want those. I think I kind of prefer email just because then I can star it so that way I'll have it. But like I said, any method really works. You could tweet at us, DM us, email us. These are all options here. I guess you could leave a YouTube comment as well, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to see it, so I would not recommend doing that. So those are all options. December 23rd, we're recording it. December 24th, it will be out. So get the questions in for the Q&A episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite episodes of the year for sure. So get your questions in, and hopefully we have a nice long show talking about your questions in independent league baseball.
Yep, absolutely there. And on that note, only thing left we have to plug is the podcast itself and the website, IndieBallReport.com, which everything I just mentioned is on there, plus show notes, plus episodes. Go to the website for that. And also, you can find the show wherever you find podcasts. So that's TuneIn, that's Apple Podcasts, it's Google Podcasts, Podbean, any of the major podcast platforms. We're on there. So rate, review, subscribe if you're able to. You know the deal by now. Feedback is appreciated so we know how to tailor the show. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Do we have anything else left to add this week?
The thing I have just a couple quick things to add. One, college football playoff is starting to happen soon, and USC losing, kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
And so I guess Ohio State is jumping for joy because they're going to be in. And all I'm saying, it's going to take is maybe TCU losing, and then Bama will get in. I don't know that. I have a feeling they'll get in anyway.
I expect Bama. Bama's going to be in Ohio State. I just have a feeling on that. I don't know why.
That would suck, but
does
I will
that
say,
stop them?
They did announce that starting in 2024, 12-team college football playoff. Lots of fun. I dig it. I like it. So I'm a big fan of that. And Rutgers basketball. They're hopefully starting to get healthy, and they're playing the Indiana Hoosiers, who for some reason people think are good. And I'm sorry. By the way, the North Carolina Tar Heels also suck. That team's not good. I was going to talk about how Rutgers owns the state of Indiana, and they're going to upset the Hoosiers at the rack this weekend. But I'm going to go on a different thing. I think I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me that on this one, Nick. How on earth were the North Carolina Tar Heels the number 1 ranked team in the preseason in college basketball? How? Absolutely
because
insane.
People, for whatever reason, thought their run in March was legitimate, when anyone that watched the ACC knew they were a mediocre team that got hot. And quite frankly, they were probably the second or third best team out of all the ACC teams that made the tournament last year. They're not that good.
They were an 8 seed.
I know. Honestly, Miami was a better team. I'm not going to lie to you. I was way more afraid of Miami. Now, obviously, it didn't work out. But in the end, they were not that good. What happened was Brady Manick got hot, as well as Armando Bacot. Those two kind of dragged them kicking and screaming through. And, I mean, are we also going to forget the fact that Baylor came within seconds of eliminating them?
Yeah.
And then they got the lucky draw of having St. Peter's, which overachieved like hell. I mean, like, they didn't exactly have the hardest run, and when they faced real opponents, they were pushed to the brink. So, like, they're not a good team. Not to mention that before they went on their losing skid, they had a bunch of cupcakes that they nearly lost to as well. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, any ACC team is good this year. Duke's okay. They're all right. They have yet to really beat a meaningful opponent outside of Ohio State. And Virginia's all right. I'm not sold on them
I think
yet.
Virginia's great. Personally.
I'm not sold on them yet. I have to watch them more to really say. I can't say they're not great. I can't say they are great because I haven't really watched them yet. But that said, I don't think the ACC is not that great this year. But but North Carolina is probably the fourth best team in this conference.
And not to mention, like I understand they brought it's just such lazy logic of they made national championship game. They bring back most of the roster. We make them number one. And what guy they didn't bring back? Their most important player by far, Brady Manick.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying. Like, Baycot's really good. Like, I don't think Caleb Love is that great, honestly.
He isn't.
And just, teams get hot in the NCAA tournament. That's what happens. And you took them from an 8 seed, bringing the most of the roster back, and you made them the preseason number one. And shockingly, they were kind of, I mean, they took care of some of the bye games at home, but they didn't really dominate in any of those. And then they head out to Portland and they really struggled, and they go play at Assembly Hall and they don't look very good. And I don't know. I don't understand the hype behind North Carolina. I don't get it at all.
Honestly, it's all about the run. And I feel like the national championship game is really like the best representation of how people view North Carolina. There's people that view them as the first half team that took up a big lead on Kansas and looked unstoppable. And then there's the people that view them as the second half team that blew the largest halftime lead in the history of the NCAA tournament to lose that national championship to Kansas, which I am hanging on to because I love that fact. And I pray to God it never changes. But I knew they were the second half team. People that watched them knew they were that second half team. They got hot. They had a fantastic run. Can't take that from them. But when the new year starts, you got to reevaluate it. And quite frankly, Houston or Gonzaga deserve that number one spot over them. And it's just how it is.
Houston's really good. Like, if Houston and North Carolina played, Houston runs that team out of the gym.
Yeah.
With those athletes they have on that team. And honestly, I think you could say the same for a team like, I think UVA is better than North Carolina. I think Duke's better than North Carolina. I mean, obviously all those games will be close no matter what. But like, I think if you put even Creighton against North Carolina, I think Creighton wins by 15.
Oh yeah.
So, not a fan of North Carolina. That's the overall point. Stop hyping up blue bloods just because they're blue bloods. Actually watch the game.
You know who deserves to be number one more than North Carolina?
Oh,
Hofstra.
I won't disagree. They're playing Purdue this week, though.
Oh, well, from experience playing Purdue, good luck. Yeah, it's not fun.
Not that. Unfortunately, we do not have a 7'4" center, so that it might be a little difficult.
It was difficult with him. It's going to be very difficult without. But one thing we both have in common is we get to see that 7'4" center.
That is true.
Which I want to point out here because we're both going to be seeing the Jimmy V Classic this upcoming week. This tournament has wound up becoming from late game, you got Duke in there and you got these other teams that should be pretty decent to oh, wow, we may have 3 top 10 teams in this tournament with all 4 teams ranked possibly.
This Jimmy V Classic that Nick and I will be going to together.
Yeah.
I mean, what great basketball games! What great matchups. Even I mean, Iowa's good too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's they score. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's Keegan Murray's brother who gets buckets for them. So, and yeah, lots of good basketball on Tuesday night at the world's most famous arena.
Yeah, like I'm really looking forward to this. Like I bought those tickets back, like I think it was September, because I was like, oh, Duke's playing. I want to see Duke in person because I never get to see Duke in person. And, it's just turned out to be like actually really solid. Like I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing Texas play Illinois now. Yeah.
And, don't ask what happened when Illinois played Syracuse. Syracuse sucks. Jim Boeheim ran will get saved for next week.
On one hand, like, and I'll leave the Boeheim rant too, because it's like, I kind of like Syracuse, but at the same time, with them being in conference, I do like them being incompetent, because it's like, okay, that's one conference game I don't have to worry about.
It's going to be the annual time where Duke comes up to Syracuse. Syracuse sells it out, and there's like 33,000 people, and Duke wipes them out by 40.
God, it's funny watching like the giant shift in opinion on Boeheim from all the Syracuse people, because I have surprisingly large amount of Syracuse people in my orbit, and just seeing the shift that's gone on over the last 2 or 3 years is very cool to watch. It's not like it's cool in more of a morbid way, because it's like, wow, they really went from like, he has done a lot for this school to, maybe it's time to just get the man gone already.
It's so bad. It is, Nick. It's pitiful. It's so bad.
This is what happens.
They've lost to Colgate and Bryant. Like, I don't even know what to say. Thank God they won when I was there, but barely.
We'll leave it at this. Syracuse is a cautionary tale to all Power 5 schools when you don't embrace the one and done era.
Amen.
It's what happens. And the thing is too, every so often, as we've seen with other ACC schools, I'll talk about Duke because I know them the best, you have players which you're like, they're going to be one and done or two and done, and then they wind up being Grayson Allen, and you're like, he stayed for 4 years and he was pretty good all 4.
Just you never know.
Yeah. All it takes
you never know what's going to happen. Oh, and also, you know how many players Syracuse added in the transfer portal this year?
I'm going to guess none.
Going into this year? Yeah. Freaking 0. None. They're playing with 5 or 6 freshmen in the rotation, and wow, shockingly, it's not working.
I don't want to go too much into it, but at the same point in time, at least if you were like, okay, it's a rebuilding year, but next year will be better, you can at least have some hope. You could come to terms with it, but it's like, I don't expect it to be better. It's just going to get worse.
It's brutal. I'll save my Boeheim rant for next week because I got one.
Well, that's something for you kids at home to look forward to. Well, it's Jim Boeheim rant, especially after watching like the Jimmy V Classic that we're probably going to get, and watching like these top tier ranked teams and knowing that was once Syracuse and now it's not.
Yep, 100%.
So we'll leave you with that to look forward to. I'm in the process of talking to people to get things scheduled, so we'll probably have somebody on, but I don't know for certain, so I'm not going to commit to it. And once again, reminder, 23rd, questions in, Q&A episode. And until next time, don't forget to play ball.